Do you like fiddling with 3 different sharpening algorithms and various sliders to get good results? Do you like purchasing preset packs from the internet just to get somewhat good looking colors? Do you like when images on the back screen of your camera do not look like the final result at all? No? Well, I don't like these things either, and that's why I work with one of the most refined imaging engines ever developed, the OM System Image Processing Engine. My name is Thomas Eisl. I'm a professional photographer from Vienna, Austria. The OM System Imaging Engine is highly customizable with unique features not to be found in any other raw conversion engine. It offers finely tuned image processing and delivers refined demosaicing, high color fidelity and stability, stepless tonal transitions, artifact-free sharpening, well-balanced noise processing and sophisticated lens corrections. It operates with 2 processing stages, a raw stage and the main image processing stage. Processing settings are stored in the RAW file and recognized by both the OEM software OM workspace and the hardware, meaning the camera. This allows for a highly efficient workflow. In this video, I will cover all the details regarding the image processing engine, and after watching it, you will be able to take full control over your OM system OM-1's image output, enabling you to create like never before. Let's start by examining the OM system image processing engine of the OM system OM-1. The first stage is the raw stage, and all processing steps that happen at this stage will permanently alter the image data stored in the raw file. There are certain automatic processing steps at this stage, and the details are not disclosed, and you also cannot adjust these settings. However, there are some user adjustable processing settings that also affect the raw data, namely low ISO processing, noise reduction, and certain computational modes like high-res shot and live ND. The resulting raw data is then either stored as a RAW file on your SD card, or it is buffered for further JPEG processing. And this brings us to the main image processing stage. This is where your photograph will get the signature OM system look. So the raw data is now processed. And again, some automatic processing steps will take place here. First and foremost, the OM system proprietary demosaicing algorithm will convert the raw data to an image that you can actually see and examine on the back screen of your camera. Then certain lens corrections will be performed. So for example, a lens distortion profile will be applied to the data, some chromatic aberrations will be removed, and selective sharpening will be applied. Additionally, the image processing will perform an adaptive diffraction correction. Everything that happens at this automatic step can, of course, not be adjusted. However, the main image processing stage is mostly user adjustable, and all the following steps can be configured by you as the photographer. And this is really an extensive library of settings that can be combined in various creative ways. Let's take a closer look. So this diagram should just give you an overview. We've got the general color and tonal processing, including white balance and the highlight and shadow control function. Then there are some other general corrections that can be user adjusted, like the noise filter and shading compensation. Also, geometric corrections can be applied to the raw data, like the fisheye compensation and the keystone compensation. Also, other processing settings take effect, like image quality and aspect ratio. So these settings are available for all the following settings. There are the picture modes, including various specialized picture modes like color creator and underwater, and of course the art filters. Also, there are certain refinements that can be applied to the picture modes. The next section is about configuring the image processing engine. I won't cover all settings in here because most of them are also explained very well in the manual, but I will focus on the most important settings that I use in my professional workflow almost every day. Low ISO processing affects all image data recorded from ISO 64 to ISO 800. This setting impacts the raw data, so it will permanently alter the recorded RAW file. You can find this setting under Menu, then Camera 1, Submenu 3, ISO Noise Reduction submenu. You can set it to either Drive Priority or Detail Priority. I recommend setting it to Detail Priority because then the OM system, OM-1, will prioritize image quality over readout and drive speed. The differences between these two modes are not huge, but they are definitely there, and you can notice them when you photograph subjects with very fine structure. I've taken a photograph of a test chart and I will show you the differences. The picture modes set the color and tonal response and are therefore the basis for all further editing, be it in camera or in OM workspace. Those settings do not affect the raw data, so even when you set a certain picture mode, you can always reverse the decision later on. Let's take a closer look at the available options. The first picture mode is Eye Enhance. It performs automatic color and contrast adjustments to the image. The strength of these adjustments can be set to either low, standard or high. Picture mode 2 and 3 are called Vivid and Natural. Those are what I like to call standard color profiles. And natural is usually my go-to image profile for 90% of my work. It applies a decent amount of contrast and tonal adjustments, but not too much, so there is still enough headroom for me to perform my own color grading and fine-tuning. Picture mode number 4 is called Muted. Muted is especially designed for further color grading and editing, and it is really very well suited for those purposes, as it contains a lot of image data, very fine gradation, and yeah, it is actually pretty easy to work with. So if you plan on applying a lot of editing steps on top of your image, then Muted is a great option. Picture mode number 5 is called Portrait, and it leads to a somewhat lighter tonal response with a focus on skin tones. So it can be actually useful if you are planning on shooting a portrait and retouching it later. I personally use the natural color profile instead because I really like the more contrasty neutral response of the natural profile instead of the portrait profile. Nonetheless, it is a good profile and you should definitely give it a try if you are mostly photographing people. Then there is the monotone profile. This is a standard monochrome profile, and by default it will perform a black and white conversion. However, in its subsettings you can select either a color filter, which will simulate the effect of a in front of the lens color filter, like in classic black and white photography. Also, there is the option to set the monochrome color. This will simulate the effects of darkroom toning. The next picture mode is not really a picture mode by itself, but it is a slot for saving a custom picture mode, and this is of course the custom picture mode. So what you can do, you can select one of the previously mentioned picture modes as a basis, and then you can perform additional adjustments, which I will talk about in a second. Another interesting picture mode is called underwater. It is for underwater photography without a flash. If you are doing that, give it a try. It is a great starting point for further editing, I'd say. Sharpness, contrast, saturation and gradation are subsettings which are available for most picture modes. To access these settings, press OK to bring up the Super Control panel, select the Picture Mode Art Filter submenu. There you just pick one of the picture modes you want to configure, and on the sidebar on the left you find all the subsettings that I'm gonna introduce to you in a second. Let's start with sharpness. Sharpness can be set from -2 to +2. This is not a regular sharpening algorithm or something like unsharp mask, which you can apply in any photo editor. Instead, sharpness sets a specific level of sharpness that will create the same impression of sharpness regardless of file output resolution. Let me explain that with a practical example. Let's say we have a photo shoot for a client, and I'm gonna capture 20 megapixel RAW files as well as small JPEGs in camera. And I will send the small JPEGs to the client. And let's say I set sharpness to +1. The client will review these small JPEGs and will pick certain images. Of course, I will process the 20 megapixel RAW files and deliver those at maximum resolution to the client. And the great thing is that without further adjustments, the sharpness algorithm will compensate for the larger file size. So the 20 megapixel files will have the same impression of sharpness as the small preview JPEGs that I sent to the client before. This is very amazing, and you actually don't have to do anything. You just have to set the sharpness level to either -2, -1, 0, +1 or +2, and this information will be stored in the RAW file. And every time you will process this RAW file with OEM software, so OM Workspace or in camera, this level of sharpness will be applied to the output resolution. It is very incredible, and honestly, this is the best sharpening algorithm for OM system OM-1 files, because it also works incredibly well with high-res shot files, applying just the perfect amount of sharpening and bringing out all details in these 80 megapixel files. Contrast can be set from -2 to +2. It will set the overall image contrast, but it will also preserve the picture mode specific color and tonal response. It is by far the best contrast adjustment option for OM-1 files. Saturation can be set from -2 to +2. It will adjust the overall saturation while preserving the picture mode specific color and tonal response. It is an excellent option to really fine-tune the look of your photograph. This is by far the best saturation adjustment option for OM-1 files. Gradation adjusts the tonality while preserving the picture mode specific color and tonal response. The options are low key, which will darken the dark tones, high key, which will brighten the bright tones, and normal, which will perform no adjustments at all. Then there is also the auto or shadow adjustment setting, which will automatically adjust all tonal values, but it will focus mostly on darker values in the image. This setting can be incredibly useful if you are dealing with high contrast situations or high dynamic range situations. You should definitely give it a try. It is quite capable. Now let me show you a few sample edits. The exposure for all these edits was exactly the same. I just changed the gradation setting. Look at how the character of the natural picture profile is preserved, although the gradation is adjusted. This is incredible, and it is very hard to imitate in third-party software. When you are utilizing the in-camera raw edit function, you cannot adjust the sharpness, contrast, saturation, and so on separately. You have to go to the super control panel, and there you can set the sharpness level and so on. Those settings are then associated with the picture mode, and when you apply the picture mode in the raw processing, these settings will be applied as well. Highlight and shadow adjustment is a tone curve-like tool for modifying tonal values. It allows for separate modification of highlights, shadows and midtones. Values from -7 to +7 can be selected for each one of these three areas. There are different ways how you can bring up the highlight and shadow control menu. I prefer the following. Just press the exposure compensation button, then the info button. Now you will see a tone curve and a histogram in gray. By turning the front dial and the rear dial, you can adjust the shadows and highlights. If you want to access the mid-tone curve, you just press info again, and then you can adjust the midtones. By pressing info again, you are back to highlights and shadows. By holding the OK button, you can reset all curves. Let's make an adjustment here, bring up the highlights by +3 and lower the shadows by -3. Now by half pressing the shutter, we are back to standard live view mode, and in the bottom right corner there is now a little symbol that shows a tone curve, which indicates that a setting to the highlight and shadow control function has been made. If we go back and bring up the highlight and shadow control panel again, hold OK so everything is reset, we will see that this little indicator is now gone. Let me give you some recommendations and use cases regarding the highlight and shadow adjustment tool. It is by far one of my favorite image editing tools of the OM system image processing engine. It can be used for lifting the shadows and lowering the highlights. You can apply an S-curve for increasing or decreasing the overall tonal contrast. You can also affect the distribution of tonal values. For example, you can lower the shadows and raise the midtones to really shift the overall look and feel of your photograph. The best thing of all is that regardless of which settings you make, you won't destroy the integrity of the color profile. So when you work with a regular curve tool in a photo editor, it can be very, very easy to mess up the overall color balance, saturation, brightness, and so on and so forth. The highlight and shadow adjustment tool does an excellent job, and I really recommend giving it a try. When performing in-camera raw editing, the highlight and shadow control can be accessed as well. It is displayed in the left side panel as high for adjusting the highlights, SH for adjusting the shadows, and mid for adjusting the midtones. The settings operate exactly the same as the highlight and shadow control curve that can be displayed during live view shooting. So every one of these three parameters can be adjusted from -7 to +7. Let's talk about Color Creator. Color Creator is a specialized picture mode based on the natural picture mode. So if you select Color Creator and just take a photograph, the result will look like it was taken with natural picture mode. However, Color Creator has two distinct sub-settings. The sub-setting Color will add one of 29 hues to the natural profile. The sub-setting Vivid will adjust the overall saturation ranging from +3 high saturation to -4 monochrome. So all in all, this sounds more like a gimmick than a serious editing feature. However, there are distinct use cases where I personally use Color Creator. Here are my recommendations. You can use Color Creator to remove tints by setting the opposite color. I will show you that in practice later. You can also use Color Creator to emphasize or create color tints in your photograph. If done correctly, this can be a great effect. However, in order to make Color Creator work, you have to have manual control over white balance, as auto white balance will shift the white balance from frame to frame in certain situations, and then you always get uneven results combined with Color Creator. So always set white balance manually when using the Color Creator. By utilizing highlight and shadow control, you can adjust the tonal values and give your Color Creator image a unique look. So now let's take a look how to use Color Creator to counter image color casts. In order to demonstrate how good Color Creator is to cancel out color casts in difficult lighting situations, I've lit our studio test scene with a green LED light. Let's bring up the picture mode menu and select the Color Creator. Now, by selecting the color and vivid section, we get the color wheel on the right hand side. By rotating the front dial, we can adjust the color cast of the scene. So if we would go to green, we would of course add an additional layer of green hue, which we don't want. So let's go to the blues, because that should cancel out the green color cast. In order to better judge when the right color is selected, I bring up Vivid to +3, so every color cast is even more visible, and this helps us selecting the best position for the Color Creator. Now I'd say that's okay, so let's bring down the vivid setting to 0. The green color cast is now gone and we can take the shot. When performing an in-camera raw conversion, the Color Creator can be selected from the picture mode selection as well. This adds the color vivid setting to the edit menu on the left. Now you can select every color and vivid setting just like before during live view shooting. Art filters apply certain color and tonal adjustments, and some of the art filters add special effects on top of that. The natural picture mode is used as basis for all art filters. You can divide the art filters roughly in two categories. Category 1 includes all art filters which only perform color and tonal adjustments, and category 2 includes all art filters which perform some special effects like softening, grain, so on and so forth on top of that. You can look at this table on my website, link down in the description. Depending on the selected art filter, additional effects can be added on top of that. For practical use, some selected category 1 filters are suitable for strong color grading. You can modify the look with the highlight and shadow control and also with the white balance. By deliberately shifting the white balance, you can really shift the overall color impression that each art filter gives you. And this can lead to a very interesting signature color grading. I'd also like to mention Art Filter 5, Grainy Film. This offers the color filter and monochrome color options that we already know from the monotone picture mode. Especially Art Filter 5.2 is suitable for simulating classic black and white film with high granularity. The OM System Imaging Engine is optimized for a professional OEM software-based workflow with the goal of minimizing post-processing time and getting the results as close to final as possible in camera. In order to make this work, you have to follow some recommendations. First and foremost, you have to get the exposure right in camera. You should not deliberately over or underexpose the image. For example, performing expose to the right. The image processing engine of OM systems is really designed to perform only exposure corrections from -2 to +2. However, it will give outstanding results in this range. Regarding the processing parameters, you really should preset all processing settings that I previously mentioned in camera. So picture mode, contrast, sharpening, and so on and so forth, even when shooting RAW only. The captured RAW files should then be processed either in camera or with OM Workspace. And what you are doing is you are not creating an image out of thin air, out of pure raw data, but you are refining an already set look. This is a huge time saver. During the editing, you should keep notes of the editing steps performed in the OEM software and manually transfer the parameters to the camera for the next shooting. By doing so, you will create a unique set of presets and further reduce the post-production time next time, because settings that you will always change in post-processing will be already baked into the RAW file. So when you load the RAW file into OM Workspace, all these settings will be loaded as well, and the RAW file will look very close to the finished result, both in OM Workspace and also on the back screen of the camera. And this is very useful, as when you are shooting for a client and you show him or her the back screen of your camera, the client will see a result that is almost finished, and that is really great. What I dubbed as the OM System Image Processing Engine is probably the most important unique selling point of the OM-1 in particular and other OM system cameras in general. It is one of the absolute best image processing engines ever conceived, and the workflow it allows really cuts down post-processing time drastically. Give it a try. You will most likely fall in love with it. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider subscribing and following me on other social media. See you next time.